The Republican Party is making inroads in the state and in southeast Arkansas. Today, we visit with Diana Harton, head of the Republican Party in Drew County, Mike Akin, Republican candidate for Senate District 26, Gary Meggs, Republican candidate for State Representative District 9, and Orlando Jones, Republican Justice of the Peace, District 1. Let's talk today about the Republican Party here in Drew County, the inroads it's made into the various offices, and what's the future of the Republican Party here in Drew County.
Chris, as I looked around the state, I was just noticing that, southeast Arkansas is so much different now than the other parts of the state. We don't have the growth here. We don't have the businesses coming here. We are just in a mess as far as, the low wages, people leaving this part of the state, and I'm sure that's something that Gary Meggs will be really talking to us about. He's got some numbers to share with us on that. The Republican Party, to me, stands for pro-growth, pro-business. I want to see South Arkansas become vibrant and growing like North Arkansas. The northwestern part of the state, they're booming up there. Even in a bad economy, they're still growing. And I want to see this part of the state, because I know that we have people down here, Mike Akin, a businessman that has the ideas and the will to change things down here. So I want to see those kind of things happen. I'm also very excited. The Republican Party here in Drew County, it has been an amazing 2 years. We have come so far since we started. I could just tell you story after story of the people that have come up and said, I'm so glad that we have a choice now, that we have people that are stepping up and wanting to run as Republicans. Here in Drew County, we haven't had Republicans elected. I'm sure in the past we've had some run, but the whole thing about you can't win in South Arkansas unless you're a Democrat, that's changing. The Democrat, we've had several of us, each one of us here today, we've had people tell us that are running on the Democrat Party, well, I really am a Republican, but you just can't get elected here in Drew County unless you run as a Democrat. Well, that's no longer true, because now we have people that have stepped up. We have 3 state candidates. We have Mike Akin running for state senate. We have Gary Meggs running for state representative for District 9, and we also have Charlie Roberts, who's running for state representative for District 10, which takes in a small part of Drew County. We've had 10 people step up on the local level. 6 of these will be running in November. They have opponents. 4 of them have no opponents, so they're already in. But those are just the kind of things that it's just exciting here now that we have choices.
Well, Diana, I'm really glad you brought up that one point about people fleeing this part of the state. That's one of my great concerns. And, the paperwork that you got me the other day from the Secretary of State's office says that since 2001, we've lost over 83,000 people in South Arkansas, Congressional District 4. Now, obviously, these are not people that don't want to work. These are people that do want to work. That's why they left. If we don't make the inroad changes to get the jobs down here, to have some different industrial ideas come into the area, we will never bring these people back. And one of the things that I find so exciting that's different than the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is the fact that we all know what the problems are, but as Mike and I and Orlando over here are talking, we actually have solutions to these problems. We've got ideas, forward-thinking ideas that can revive our area. One of my big trademark running campaign platforms is the free enterprise zone. The government has had free enterprise zones around the world for a long time. It was designed to revive areas, inner city areas and rural areas, just like us, just like Drew and Ashley County, which I want to see revive. And what that free enterprise zone does, if we can get the right people in the legislature to vote this in, that will give us the capability of having tax incentives and, more importantly, regulatory relief to bring these people in and bring new industry in to build these jobs. We already know it works because they're drawing everybody out of southwest Arkansas into Texas. That's why we've had such a massive loss over there. We've got people fleeing to Mississippi doing these same ideas that I'm talking about. We've got to get proactive, and we have to get what's necessary for Southeast Arkansas. And the only way to do that is to send new people to the state, like Mike and I, on that level, that will stand up and vote for what is good for us. You know, these votes that we have that tend to leave South Arkansas out and send everything in another direction, we just can't any longer stand for that. We have to get things better for South Arkansas.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Gary. What's exciting about this primary and the general election is people now have a choice. Whereas before, you had the May election, the May primaries, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't any opposition for November. So competition's good for everybody. It's good for the area, it's good for the politicians, it's good in business. It causes you to hone your skills and get better. And it causes you to focus on the issues, and so I think competition is a good thing.
Yeah, when one party has control for so many years, it's good to have a two-party system where there's checks and balances between the two parties. And
I just echoing some of what Gary says about what is it going to take to jumpstart Southeast Arkansas. I really believe there are people that are already here, that they've got ideas, they've got, you know, they've been exposed to things, they want to try things as far as business startups, you know, explore their goals, their dreams, but they're afraid to. You know, they're definitely afraid of government and regulation and some of the red tape they're going to have to deal with. And I think we've got to take that burden off of these folks and encourage them to explore and try explore their ideas. I'll tell a little story, and I think it rings pretty true. And that is, you could go to Little Rock tomorrow and get on a Delta Airlines jet and fly to London. And once you're in London, you could take a cab to a Holiday Inn. And on the way to the Holiday Inn, you could stop at Walmart and pick up some snacks or whatever, and you could even get some Tyson's foods while you're there. Once you're at the hotel, you could relax and enjoy a nice cold Coca-Cola, and you could also receive an overnight delivery from FedEx. Well, the analogy of the whole thing is these are all companies started in the South, some of them in Arkansas, with very humble beginnings. And it's not impossible. It can happen again. And why? And if people are properly encouraged and really they really want to explore and seek out and try their ideas or their plans or their dreams, it can happen again. And that's been my premise, or it is one of my goals, is we need to identify that next Sam Walton or that next Fred Smith and encourage them to give it a go. We need to get behind them and help them.
Chris, something that was so exciting to me this past few weeks ago, whenever we were doing our filing for candidates and things like that, is I got a phone call from a man that I'd never met before, but he introduced himself and he told me that he was Orlando Jones and he had been a JP here in Drew County for 2 terms, and he had always run under the Democrat ticket, but that he wanted to switch parties. I talked to Orlando a little bit and just was amazed at his story, that he just had never felt like he could win as a Republican in a Democrat part of the state that was controlled by the Democrats. So after Orlando and I talked, I've just been so impressed with this young man, and he is just somebody that is going to help us make history here in Southeast Arkansas. Orlando, you are just, I'm very impressed with you, by the way. I know I just said that, but you are very authentic. You are someone that I think has a passion for this part of the state and for your state and your country. I'd like you to talk a little bit about why you switched over from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party.
Well, first of all, I don't know about the being impressed part, but I am authentic. But as you said, that I've been JP for 2 terms. This is my 3rd term, and I did file as a Democrat in the first stages of my political office. I didn't think that I would be received as a Republican because of the area that we're in. But my reason for finally deciding to change to the Republican Party is because of the state that I see the country is headed and some of the things that are happening out of Washington that I didn't identify with growing up with the values that I grew up with, the traditional values that I grew up in the South. Grew up in a Pentecostal home. Anybody who understands or who knows Pentecostal church is a very conservative church. And we teach certain values, and those values are the values that I grew up with. And I noticed that Washington is just changing the direction of the country and some of the things that they're being very aggressive about in changing those values. So I thought the least that I could do, didn't know if anyone would listen, but I wanted to make a statement. And that statement was that we've got to change the direction that the country is going, and it starts locally. And I'm glad to be working with people like Mike and Gary and Diana, who I feel are definitely a great team that can help us to change the direction that the country is going. And they all have different experiences. Mike is a very skilled businessman. Gary's an educator. I think we just have a vast group of people that are working together as a team to try to help to change the direction that the country is headed.
You know, another one of the reasons that I'm running for office, guys, is kind of like Mike. I'm in a really unique situation in the fact that I've got a granddaughter that's 16 months old. My daughter and her husband live here. They're in their 20s. My wife and I are in our 50s, and my mother is 90, and she's out at the nursing home. So I have a broad vision of what's going on from the very beginning to the very end. And I see areas in all of those that concern me. I really want to see the last part of my family be able to stay in South Arkansas. All the rest of my family lives everywhere else. I was born and raised in El Dorado, and I don't have much family left there. They've all gone to other states or the northern part of this state, and I don't want to see our families continue to do that. I want my family to be here. I want them to have the traditional values that Orlando was talking about, which we still do have in this area. And I think the Republican Party is going to make a big statement because we are connected to the traditional values that our country was built on. You know, I have to admit to you guys, I was a Democrat pretty much my whole life. And I don't feel like that I left the Democratic Party. I really feel like it left me. It gave me no other option except to go to the other side. And because the traditional values, and you can see it, Orlando was talking about it on the national level, they're trying to change every value that we just love so much down in this part of the country. And I personally want to take a stand against that. And the Democratic Party, especially on the state level and on the national level, has gone way too far on the liberal side for me to be able to do that anymore. So, you know, the only option that we have to run conservatively is on the Republican Party right now.
I just want to say, chiming in on the values part, that's something that's very strong for me, and it's very confusing sometimes when you have conversations with people who say, well, they accept one thing, but then they don't accept the other as it relates to those values. So, for example, if they're part of the Democratic Party, they'll say, well, that's not how I believe, or they'll say, here in the South, we don't have to worry about that. But their being a part of the party means that they're supporting those values, you know? So it's confusing to me. Either you have those values or you don't. It's hard for me to understand how you say you identify with certain traditional values, but then you're part of an organization or a party that is definitely anti those values. So yeah, that's very confusing to me. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to make the statement that I made, because especially within my community votes upwards of 90% for the Democratic Party, and they've done it for years. But as I stated earlier, the way that I grew up, the church that I grew up in, and I'm surrounded by several people who grew up with those same values. But then when it comes to the politics of it, for some reason, we do not hold to those values, but we vote against what our values say that we are, who we are.
Because, Orlando, that's something that, people don't realize, there's only one Democrat Party. There's not a state party, there's not a national party and a local party, it's all one party. And, we can't separate that. I use this analogy all the time that, if you're a Baptist and you go to church every week and your pastor gets up there and he starts preaching against something that you don't agree with, sort of like our president has done, the gay marriage thing was huge when he came out and announced that a few weeks ago. When they come out, when your leader comes out and starts talking about something that you don't agree with, you're either going to leave that church or that group and go find somebody that does represent your values, or you're going to remove that leader. So, like I said, the Democrat Party has changed over the years. If you look at the history of the parties and everything, the Republican Party today is more what the Democrat Party was 50 years ago. Used to, the Democrat Party had the more conservative values. They were for the working man. That was kind of the whole Democrat Party mantra, but today it's kind of reversed, and now the Republican Party is seen to be the party that is more in line with the values of the working man. They're for the, like I said, the small business guy, things like that. So, we just can't separate the parties anymore and say, well, I'm a local Democrat, but, I really don't believe in what the party stands for, because it makes a difference. It's all about the values and things that the party believes in, and you have to know.
Right. And being a part of the party at a local level, the party that you are supporting, whether it be in finances or whatever, on the local level, if you're a part of the party, then you're sending your support to the national.
Right.
There's no way that you can separate yourself. If you're a part of the party on a local level, you're still a part of the party at the national level. So if you're happy with the direction that the national party is going, then you're in the right place.
Right.
But if you're not, you need to be looking at different options.
Right.
That's right.
Mike, you made a mention earlier about regulation. And since you're a strong businessman, I've got a question that maybe you could help us clear up. I talked to a friend of mine here in town, and there's an organization in the state, I believe it's called the AEDQ. ADEQ.
Right.
Which is basically the Arkansas EPA, right?
Right.
Well, I understand there's a business here in town that was a thriving business at one time, and now that there's about 200 less employees than they did have. And one of the issues that the company had was the Arkansas EPA, I'll call it, where they came in and did some kind of investigation, and he had to do some paperwork. And he had 4 clerical errors. I don't mean big errors, just checked the wrong boxes, which was easily corrected, and had a disagreement on the storage of his cleaning rags. And this state regulatory organization, when it first came through, they gave him a fine of $28,000. Is that going on all over the place down here? I mean, is that something that's statewide?
I can't speak for all industries, but I have shared some of the same experiences or conversations with other companies, and they're an agency. They are the Arkansas EPA. You're right, and I guess they got to sustain themselves, and that's my problem with some of the regulations. And ADEQ is just one of those agencies, and that is that they need to become a solutions agency and not some kind of a Gestapo, something like that, where they really become a help aid to people. I think by and large, industry's not wanting to go out here and pollute the environment or pour chemicals in the hole or on the ground, but it's maybe, especially in small businesses, they just don't have the staff to dedicate to the clerical side of it. And therein lies where some of these state agencies could come in and help train or be an assistance to the industry. Georgia Pacific, CrossIT, another example. They tell me they're just so that EPA is involved in their business. Again, they're trying to abide by the standards, or not harm the environment, but as you know as well as I do, until you have lived in that environment or worked in it, some of the things that some for lack of a better word, bureaucrats want to legislate somewhere and they've never lived it. It's not, they don't know, and it won't work. And we need more real life experience that's been there, done that, and that can interact with some of these agencies and unload some of this regulation off of business and industry that's really hamstringing them from being able to accomplish. And therein lies what I alluded to earlier, that I think some people they've heard these horror stories, and they're not wanting, they've got these ideas they want to try, but they're not willing to, because they're afraid that, they won't any more than get started, and they'll be looking at a $10,000 fine one day, and that could put them out of business. And therein, that's one of the areas where I think we could get into, like-minded people could get involved. And Orlando, I agree with what you were saying, and I think it's kind of a little, I've used it a few times, but I believe it. And that is, I think there is still a majority of people out there that are for everyday family values, conservative principles, and I think we are the silent majority, and we've sat still too long and let the vocal minority get their way. And I think people are ready for a change. I think that was demonstrated pretty visibly by the the Democratic vote in the presidential race.
Yes. Yes.
And the amount of votes. I'd never heard of John Wolf.
Never heard of him till the election night.
I wouldn't have known him if he walked up to me. But yet he drew 40% of the Democratic vote. So I think people are just voting for change.
Yes.
And they're ready to make a difference.
That's sort of another thing that on the Republican Party in Drew County as a whole that's exciting to me is the quality of the candidates that we have. None of our candidates are what I would call politicians. Mike, he's always been a businessman. When I approached him about running, it was kind of a ha-ha moment, but as he started looking at it and thinking about it, he realized that he had something to offer the state of Arkansas. He stepped up. Gary, again, educator, never thought about running for public office. Jesse Griffin, a retired 27-year-old command sergeant major from the Army, has running for county judge here. He is just extremely qualified for the position. Andrea Husky, running for collector, years in the banking industry, worked in accounting, just has a great background in the, like I said, but they're just not what you would call a politician. These aren't people that have sat around waiting on the next office that they could run for. They've been out there working, they've been out there making a living, and just like I said, we've just got some great qualified candidates. Every one of our candidates are qualified for the offices that they're seeking, and I'm just excited that they've stepped up. It takes a lot of courage to run for office, and it takes a lot of time and money, and it's not just something that you do. I've learned so much over the past 2 years since I've gotten involved in this process that you just don't say I'm going to run for office and then sit back and do nothing. You have to get out and work every day. You have to raise money. You have to have contact with the people. So I'm just excited about the quality of candidates that we've got and the quantity. Like I said earlier, 10 on the local level, 3 on the state. That's huge for Southeast Arkansas. We're being watched all over the state as we go into November. Winning these elections is going to be huge. Like I said, the host state is watching us. They're ready to see what's going to happen down here in Southeast Arkansas, because whatever Drew County does here, it's going to spread. We're going to be kind of the shining light or the leading edge of this whole movement, and that's exciting for us here in Drew County.
Now, Diana, as head of the Republican Party here in Drew County, what would you say to one of our viewers that traditionally have always voted Democratic, perhaps their parents have, their grandparents have? What would you say to them to make them perhaps switch their allegiance?
Well, first I would say that the Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party that it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago. You know, if you listen to a lot of news on the national level and everything, you hear terms like hijacked by a socialist movement, or, you know, gone over to a different side, or just, you hear terms like that. But, you know, all it is that, you know, elections have consequences, and when you put people into office that don't share the values that you share, if, you know, I've got a few numbers here. You know, when you're looking in Drew County and you say we've got roughly 18,500 people living in Drew County, out of those people, only 9,000 are registered to vote, and then when elections come around, only less than half of those 9,000 turn out to vote. The Republican Party today is more conservative. You know, they're the party, like I said earlier, that, you know, we want less government intrusion in our lives. We want less taxes. We want to basically be left alone. We want, you know, we want to get up and go to work every day, and we want to raise our families, and we want to go home at night and go to the ball games and things like that. And we don't want to have to sit around and worry every day about, you know, the things that are going on in Washington or in Little Rock or even in your local government. We want to have people elected that we trust and that we know are going to take care of our, that have the same values that we do, and that are going to take care of our interest. And you know, getting involved in politics is not something that everybody wants to do, and it's not something that even interests most people. But we've got to know what our leaders stand for. We've got to know, you know, what they're going to do when they get to office to represent us. And if they don't do what we want, then we have to replace them. We have to, you know, we have to make changes. People talk all the time about we need term limits. Well, we have term limits, and it's called elections. If you have an elected leader that's not doing what you want, then you replace them. So I guess to answer your question on what, you know, I would just encourage people to know, to study, to look at what the party stands for. You can go online and you can search, you can, you know, Google or whatever, Republican Party platform, Democrat Party platform. You need to look at the differences in the parties. It makes a difference. Arkansas is on the verge. We are so close to taking majorities in the Arkansas and the Little Rock House and the Senate. I think we need 3 senators and 5 representatives to have a majority in the Republican Party in the state of Arkansas. The Republican Party is really interested in reviving the economies in South Arkansas. It's not just a South Arkansas thing. This goes all throughout the state. If we do well down here, the state of Arkansas does well. So with these guys, with Gary, with Mike, our local guys, with the ideas that they have, we're just sitting on a gold mine here, I believe, and I just really encourage people to know what your party stands for. Next Saturday, we're going to be having an ice cream social up here on the square. We've got Lieutenant Governor Mark Darr will be in town, and so will the head of the Republican Party, Doyle Webb, Republican Party for the state of Arkansas. We're going to have our local Republican candidates out here. Hope to have a little live music. I'm going to have some great door prizes. So this is just a great time. If you're in town next Saturday, June the 2nd, between the hours of 5 and 7, 8 p.m., come up here, have some ice cream with us, meet these candidates, shake their hand, talk to them, find out what they represent, who they are. Like I said, a great time to come out and meet your Lieutenant Governor, Mark Darr.
Do you have to be a Republican to come?
Absolutely not. We encourage everybody to come up. Just come up and meet these guys. Like I said, it doesn't have, just because you're a Democrat, you need to come up and meet these guys, know what they stand for, see why you might want to change and vote for them in November. We've done a little campaign here. It's called, we're kind of calling it the Faith, Family, and Freedom campaign. If you go on 425, right across from Walgreens, you're going to see a billboard that we just put up. It'll be up for through November, and we're just really pleased with that billboard. It says support, or actually it says Faith, Family, and Freedom, vote conservative, vote Republican. That's just kind of our message now that, you know, we do have a choice. We really feel like the Republican Party here in Drew County represents the conservative values, and we want people to just meet us, know who we are, If anybody's interested in the Republican Party here in Drew County, they can contact me. I have you can go to the DrewCountyGOP.org website. My email is chairman@DrewCountyGOP.org. Would be glad to hear from people if anybody has any questions. Would be just very happy to talk to them, and we just want people to get involved. You know, we've got to quit sitting back and letting the same old happen. We've got to get involved, you know, meet your candidates, know what they stand for, and we're just thrilled about the future here in Drew County.